Daddy, I had a bad dream. You blink your eyes and pull up on your elbows. Your clock glows red in the darkness. It's 3:23. Do you want to climb into bed and tell me about it? No, Daddy. The oddness of the situation wakes you up more fully. You can barely make out your daughter's pale form in the darkness of your room. Why not, sweetie? Because my dream, when I told you about the dream, the thing wearing Mommy's skin sat up. For a moment you feel paralyzed. You can't take your eyes off your daughter. The covers behind you begin to shift. Bad Dream. Originally published April 10th, 2013. Author unknown. During the summer of 1983, in a quiet town near Minneapolis, Minnesota, the charred body of a woman was found inside the kitchen stove of a small farmhouse. A video camera was also found in the kitchen, standing on a tripod and pointing at the oven. No tape was found inside the camera at the time. Although the scene was originally labeled as a homicide by police, an unmarked VHS tape was later discovered at the bottom of the farm's well, which had apparently dried up earlier that year. Despite its worn condition and the fact that it contained no audio, police were still able to view the contents of the tape. It depicted a woman recording herself in front of a video camera, seemingly using the same camera the police found in the kitchen. After positioning the camera to include both her and her kitchen stove in the image, the tape then showed her turning on the oven, opening the door, crawling inside, and then closing the door behind her. 8 minutes into the video, the oven could be seen shaking violently, after which point thick black smoke could be seen emanating from it. For the remaining 45 minutes of video, until the batteries in the camera died, it remained in its stationary position. To avoid disturbing the local community, police never released any information about the tape, or even the fact that it was found. Police were also not able to determine who put the tape in the well, or why the height and stature of the woman in the video didn't come close to matching the body they'd found in the oven. The Woman in the Oven. Originally published August 8th, 2010. Author unknown. In the small, forgotten town of Franklin, there was a video game store that time seemed to have overlooked. Tucked away in a dusty corner, Mind Games was known for its vast collection of old games, many of which were rumored to be one of a kind. One autumn evening, a teenager named Jake, fascinated by urban legends, stumbled upon an old, unlabeled cartridge for a long-discontinued console. The cover was a faded image of a mansion under a stormy sky, with the title barely legible, The Last Night. Excited by his find, Jake rushed home, eager to play. He plugged in the console, inserted the cartridge, and powered it on. The screen flickered to life with a static before settling on the game's title screen, which was eerily silent except for the distant sound of thunder. As Jake started playing, he found himself controlling a character who looked uncannily similar to him. The game was set in a sprawling, decrepit mansion filled with puzzles and shadowy figures that moved just out of sight. Each room he entered seemed to mirror rooms in his own house, down to the smallest detail. The game's atmosphere was oppressive, with a constant feeling of being watched. Jake's character could interact with objects, read letters, and even listen to recordings that told a chilling tale of a family cursed to relive their last night in the mansion, doomed by a pact with a malevolent entity. Hours passed, and Jake, now deeply engrossed, noticed something odd. The time in the game was exactly the same as the real world. As midnight approached in both, The game's narrative took a turn. The character was now being chased by a figure with no face, only darkness where eyes should be. Jake attempted to quit the game, but it failed. The console wouldn't turn off. His heart raced as he navigated his character through increasingly familiar corridors, realizing with horror that they were now exact replicas of his home. At the stroke of midnight, both in the game and on his clock, the faceless figure cornered Jake's character. On screen, the figure extended a shadowy hand, and the game's perspective shifted. Jake was no longer controlling his character. He was watching from the entity's viewpoint. A cold whisper filled the room. "You shouldn't have invited me in." The screen went black, but the game didn't end. Instead, Jake heard footsteps from his living room. Turning off the console was impossible. It was as if the game had become a portal. The next morning, Jake's parents found the console still on, the game paused on the title screen. Of Jake, there was no sign, only a note in his handwriting that read, "I'm in the game now. Don't play." Mind Games was found ransacked, with every copy of The Last Night missing, as if the game had never existed. But somewhere in the digital void, Jake plays on, forever trapped in a haunted video game where every night is his last. In the wooded expanse behind their small town, where the trees grew thick and the daylight seemed to filter through a mournful haze, 4 children, Tim, Ellie, Riley, and Max, gathered. They were drawn by the thrill of the unknown, the kind of adventure only the forest could offer. Today they planned to explore the old abandoned cabin that locals whispered about with nervous glances. The cabin, hidden beneath overgrown vines and shadowed by ancient oaks, was said to be the home of a hermit who vanished without a trace. The children, armed with flashlights and the reckless courage of the young, pushed through the underbrush towards their goal. Inside the cabin was cold, the air stale with the scent of decay. Old furniture draped in cobwebs stood like sentinels in the dim light. The floorboards creaked underfoot, each step a whisper in the quiet. They explored with hushed awe, their laughter subdued by the eerie atmosphere. Then, in a back room, Riley found a doll. It was old, its porcelain face cracked, one eye missing, the remaining one staring blankly. "Creepy," Max chuckled, but there was an edge of discomfort in his voice. As they prepared to leave, a sudden chilling giggle echoed through the cabin. It was high-pitched, almost metallic, like the sound of a child giggling through a tin can. The children froze. The doll, which they had placed on a dusty table, now sat on the floor, its one eye facing them. "Let's get out of here," Tim whispered, his voice barely audible. They turned, but the door they had entered through was now locked from the outside. Panic set in, each child pushing and pulling at the stubborn wood. The giggling grew louder, more frequent, and seemed to be all around them. Shadows moved where there should be none, and the temperature dropped, their breath visible in the dim light. Then they heard it, a voice, small and chilling. "Why did you come? Why did you wake me up?" They huddled together, flashlights flickering as if in fear. Tim, mustering all his courage, shouted, "We just wanted to play. We'll leave, okay?" The room fell silent. The door, with a loud creak, swung open, revealing the dark woods outside. They ran, non-stop until they reached the safety of the town's lights, the cabins giggling, fading into the night. From that day, the children avoided the woods, their innocence touched by something ancient and unsettling. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, if you listened closely, you could hear a faint, eerie laugh coming from the depths of the forest. In the sleepy coastal town of Willow's End, where the ocean whispers secrets to the shore, something otherworldly was about to make itself known. It was dusk when Sarah, a marine biologist, decided to take her kayak out for one last paddle before nightfall. The water was unusually calm, almost like glass, reflecting the fading light in eerie tranquility. As she glided further from the shore, a strange rhythmic pulsing began to resonate through the water, vibrating up through her kayak. Sarah paused, her paddle hovering above the water. "What in the world?" she murmured, her curiosity piqued. The pulsing grew stronger, and then from the depths, a light began to rise. It wasn't the bioluminescent glow she was familiar with. This was a cold, unnatural light. A figure emerged, breaking the surface with a soundless grace. It was humanoid, but wrong in every way. Its skin was translucent, revealing a network of glowing veins. Its eyes were large, devoid of pupils, and its mouth was a slit that didn't move, yet it spoke. "Sarah," it hissed, her name sounding like a violation in its voice. "How do you know my name?" she stammered, her heart pounding against her ribcage. "We've been watching," it replied, its voice like a chorus of whispers. "You're not alone." Before Sarah could react, tendrils shot out from the water, wrapping around her limbs, pulling her towards the creature. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the ocean's vastness. As she was dragged under, the last thing she saw was the creature's face, not malevolent, but profoundly sad, as if it knew the horror it brought was not of its choosing, but of necessity. The next morning, her kayak was found empty, drifting aimlessly. The townsfolk whispered of a curse or a sea monster, but none knew of the truth that lurked beneath the waves, waiting for the next curious soul to venture too far from the safety of the shore.